If I haven't had an opportunity to meet you before, my name is John Rice, and I'm the president and CEO of United Way of Central Minnesota, and I'm here today to talk a little bit about a little snapshot of poverty. Poverty, this is a snapshot of poverty in the greater St. Cloud area. I really want to give a big shout out to Rich McDonald and King Banyan. This presentation wouldn't have come together if it wasn't for them, let's be honest. Most of the data is from the American Community Survey. It's a US Census Bureau. From both 1 year and 5 year average surveys, it includes the MSA, St. Cloud MSA. So this is Stearns and Benton counties. So this is looking at people right here. This data is local. It's just a snapshot. I pulled it apart. There are themes that emerge, and again, thanks to King and Rich for helping me pull some of this stuff out. Poverty affects all of our pillars, and all of our pillars can affect poverty. Remember, this is local data. We're talking about people right here in central Minnesota. 14.5%, or about a little over 27,000 people in the greater St. Cloud community area live in poverty. So if you think about the people that are here, that's at least one person at every table, okay? When we talk about poverty, we're talking about different scales of poverty. If you are one person, if you make less than $12,000, you're considered to live in poverty. If you're a two-parent, two-kid household, then you're at 24,000, and you can see some of the other scales there. Now, we do have college students. We are a college town, and so there are college students that are in this number. It's just a little over 5,000, about 5,300. But again, those are individuals that are living and working and being a part of our community that are dealing with issues of poverty just like everybody else. The number of those living in poverty has increased in the greater St. Cloud area. In 2006, it was around 12.3% of our population. Currently, we're higher, as you see on the chart there, higher than during the Great Recession. When you think about the different groups that are experiencing poverty, the elderly are a population that has also been increasing over the last couple of years. It's around 12% of those 65 and older in the greater St. Cloud community are living in poverty. It's been pretty steady, although it's gone up the last couple of years. The overall poverty rate is high, is at a pretty high when you think about the fact that we have really low unemployment rates. This isn't something you normally see. Usually when unemployment rates, you've heard about the interesting things that are happening in the economy pillar. We've seen two really big increases in women and children. Children are living in poverty across central Minnesota at a pretty alarming rate. 24% of children locally under the age of 5. So this is that group Partners for Student Success was talking about in terms of trying to get them ready for kindergarten. Almost a quarter of them are living in poverty. 19.9%, almost 20% of all kids 18 and under are living in poverty. That's up from 12.4% in 2006. Females tend to have higher poverty than males. About 16.7% of females are living in poverty, 12.2% of males. This is the highest rate in a decade for females. Female-led families, so if you think about single mothers, okay, female-led families without a husband present, single mothers, 44% of single mothers with kids under the age of 18 are living in poverty. Married couples do have significantly less poverty. It's a historical trend that female-led families are 10 times more likely to be in poverty. Married couples have shown an increase over the last 2 years. It has been one of those places that has increased the poverty level. We also have racial and ethnic disparities that are pretty significant in the greater St. Cloud area. 12.4% of the white population is below the poverty level. 39.4% of the Hispanic or Latino population is below the poverty level. 49.2% of the Native American or Alaskan Native population is below the poverty level, and 54.3% of the Black and African American population is below the poverty level. There are racial and ethnic disparities that we have throughout central Minnesota, and it's something that we need to own and to see as we continue to do the work across these pillars. When you look at total numbers, though, we can go back to female and kids are still the biggest group, and we're talking about, again, the white population. 21,000 out of the 27,000 were white. Our diversifying population has an impact on poverty in the greater St. Cloud area, just like our students do, but it's not the only factor. We need to be asking questions, how are we dealing with all of these? Now, when we look at it, it does get a little bit harder to see, okay, where is some of this poverty coming from? And it's sometimes a little hard to see when it comes to our newest immigrant populations are not tracked specifically within the US Census Bureau. So let's look at a couple of different things that will tell us that we can look a little deeper for in the greater St. Cloud area. When you look at native-born versus foreign-born, we can look at language spoken. Those are two areas. There were 22,857 people born in the United States who are living in poverty. So again, you think about that 2,700 number. Most of those who are living in poverty in central Minnesota were born in the United States. There were 3,847 people who were born outside of the United States. Both of those numbers are on the rise. We can also look at language spoken at home. There were 18,806 individuals who spoke only English at home. There were 1,265 individuals who spoke only Spanish, and there were 3,611 individuals, over half of these, 56% of them children, whose language was something other than, so this is where it gets interesting when we try to think about this, something other than English, Spanish, Indo-European, or Asian Pacific. And why I give you this category is because, again, as you think about then who does that leave in central Minnesota, that leaves some of our newest immigrant population, the Somali, the Oromo, some of that population. Again, that number is on the rise, and the kids within that are living in poverty. It's not exact science because, again, the US Census Bureau doesn't actually ask some of those questions, but we can look at it. What does this tell us? It tells us that poverty in the greater St. Cloud area is all of our issue. You can't chase away these numbers by saying, oh, it's the students, or oh, it's the immigrant population. This is all of us. This is us living in this region. There's poverty everywhere. Now, poverty affects all of our pillars, and all of our pillars really affect those living in poverty. Let's take a look at the education. The education premium here in our greater St. Cloud area is getting larger. So this is for the population who's 25 or older, so should have had or could have had the opportunity to get through high school. 34% of those without a high school diploma live in poverty. 9% of those with a high school diploma. It drops all the way to 4% with those with a bachelor's degree. What does this tell us? This tells us that getting that education is paramount to helping us keep people out of poverty. You saw earlier on the Partner for Students Success slide, I didn't know they were going to steal this piece as well, but I was going to reference it here, that 64.4% of those on free and reduced lunch, so those are kids that are probably living in poverty already, that's in that free and reduced lunch area, 64% of those are graduating. So think about the number of students that aren't graduating with a high school degree, right? Now we start thinking how these things really can interrelate. We also have to think about our economy, and again, we're doing some really incredible things and things are getting better, but full-time work has a huge impact. And when it goes back to you start thinking about the single moms, then you start thinking about childcare, you start thinking about transportation, how all of these things really come together. 2.3% of full-time workers experience poverty in central Minnesota. Okay, so people who worked full-time all year. It jumps to 11.8%. Now we're just looking at single moms here because it's one of those things we can pull out, female-led households. 11.8% of single moms who worked full-time all year still experience poverty. And you can say that's a big number, but then when you jump to the number of 34.4%, when you add in single moms who maybe were working, but only were working part-time, when you pull in all of that work, you can see having full-time employment is a huge deal to help alleviate some of the poverty that we have here in central Minnesota. So it's not about what's happening here, it's about how do we build systems, how do we build the economy, how do we build childcare, how do we build education and transportation that works for everybody. Affordable housing also matters. You heard me talk about that as a part of the housing pillar. Owning a home is almost impossible for those living in poverty or close to it. 72.4% of those below the poverty line rent. This compares to about 20%. Interesting piece about the 20% who are above the poverty line, that number is increasing. We know that from demographic trends. People are renting more than they're buying houses. But it still says, there's data by the Minnesota Housing Partnership, who I talked about, they're helping us with that coalition to get more affordable housing built in central Minnesota. They have data that shows that housing is at a premium in the St. Cloud area. We have record low vacancy rates. Rates of an average apartment are around $720 per month, and more than 70 to 90% of those people who are at that poverty rate in terms of income level again are cost burdened. So that means they're spending a significant portion of their income on their housing. What does this cause? This causes choices of rent versus food. Okay? It causes rent versus car repairs, rent versus school clothes, rent versus medical care. All of these things that are so important to our poverty, that are so important to poverty, but also all of our pillars are all tied up into these things. Now, when you take a snapshot, there's usually a lot to look at, right? There's many different areas. If I took a snapshot of all of you, I'd have lots of faces to look at. The faces aren't any different than the faces in this room, but there are faces that are struggling more than others. The African Americans, Hispanic and Latino, single mothers, and especially kids. The question is, what do we want to do about it? Right? Is there something we can do about it? As Dave referenced, this is the war on poverty has been going on a lot longer than, I'm happy Dave can say that it was before him, definitely before me. Thank you very much, Dave. We have to acknowledge that there are things that are going on, fundamental things that are going on that we need to look at and try to fix. Solving poverty might be too big for us, but solving problems within this that will affect the people that we're working and live with are things that we can do. So we can work together to build educational opportunities for everybody. We can work together to build job opportunities, and then the childcare system that allows single moms, that allows families to have their kids in quality daycares. We can work together to build racial and ethnic, to bridge our racial and ethnic differences so there's equal opportunity for all of us. As you heard from these pillars, there's a lot of work that's going on. There's a lot of really amazing things that are happening in the greater St. Cloud area. But we have to acknowledge the fact that there are some people who are getting left behind. And there are groups that are being left behind. So you might be sitting out there saying, what do I do? Well, you can donate. There are lots of really incredible organizations that are working hard for this. You can volunteer. There's lots of places to volunteer and to get involved. If you find the sheet, everybody please pick up the sheet that's in front of you. Okay? It has lots of different ways where you can get active, get involved, find out more information. If there's one thing that you take away from today's meeting, please take away that sheet. And please, everyone, think to themselves, what is the one thing I'm going to do from this sheet? This is the call to action, that you can do something to help our community and to help those that are in poverty by just getting involved in the one place that you're most passionate about. I hope this has provided a little bit of information that you didn't know before. I hope it sparked a little bit of curiosity. I also hope it's maybe sparked a little bit of creativity out there, because you're the people that are going to make the difference. You're the people that are going to change lives. I want to thank you for this opportunity to talk a little bit about poverty in central Minnesota. Again, I want to thank King Banyan and Rich McDonald for really providing the information. There's a lot more to do and a lot more work to come in this area, but we're so excited about the fact that we can make a difference together. With that, I'm going to ask Marilyn Berkland to come up because she's going to introduce our incredible main speaker that we have today. But thank you very much.